What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Silver and Gold. I'm Josh.
And I'm Mike.
Today we're bringing to you sort of a mini episode. It's episode 20, but it's sort of an emergency because the Raiders have just let go of Josh McDaniels and Dave Ziegler. All you Raider fans at home that were praying that this would happen months ago, what's happening now? Well, it happened two nights ago, right, Mike?
Tuesday night, Halloween.
Yeah. And Mike, tell me how you're feeling. What's the overall, emotion with you right now?
I feel great. I really didn't think that Mark Davis was going to do this mid-season. I thought he was going to wait until towards the end of the season. And the reasoning mostly was because I think, I don't think Mark Davis ever wanted to give up on the season. And that's how I imagined it would feel if he fired McDaniels. I didn't think firing Ziegler was going to happen, at least not until McDaniels was fired. But I mean, once the news broke, I was like, yeah, no, that makes sense. And recent weeks, we've been talking about Jimmy Garoppolo's contract, and I don't think Ziegler was all that impressive. He was very, I think, conservative, and he never did anything to blow you away other than trading for Davante Adams. But let's be honest here, that was probably in large part because of Derek Carr. So, and I think if Davante knew how things would go with Carr and McDaniels and Garoppolo, he wouldn't have signed on to a new deal with us,
I would say the most impressive thing he did was actually the contract with Max Crosby.
Yeah.
And then bringing Davante Adams here it was a great trade. The only problem was you got rid of the only quarterback who was able to hit him.
Yeah.
It's still yet to be seen with O'Connell, and we'll get to him in a minute. But
yeah. I mean, and then another very questionable move that Ziegler made was, they came in and the first players that they signed were Max Crosby, and that's a great deal on both ends. Max Crosby talked about it recently on his podcast. We might pull that video up. He said it, it's a life-changing contract for him and he's thankful for them. But at the same time, this is from me, not Max Crosby. It's a team-friendly deal, But they also re-signed Hunter Renfrow and proceeded to just not use him. So I don't really understand that, I think at the time they didn't have Davante Adams, but still, it's all the talk was, McDaniels, he's able to be adjustable, and yet he can't adjust to make the offense run through Davante Adams. Hunter Renfrow did good with Jacoby Myers, but he has previous experience with him, right?
Yeah, Mike, if you don't mind me interrupting, I guess the former president of the United States, Donald Trump, has something to say about the Josh McDaniels thing. Do you mind if I pull that up?
Go right ahead.
Get that son of a bitch off the field right now. Out. He's fired. He's fired.
Yeah. And
pull that up.
Yeah. And I came into this offseason, I actually got to shame myself for a second because I was pretty adamant that Mark Davis wouldn't fire McDaniels this season. I might have said unless things go drastically bad, which they did. But I was convinced that they were going to get a 3-year leeway, or whatever you want to call it, buffer. And then Mark Davis would decide whether or not this regime was capable of actually playing out a rebuild of this team. And I mean, it took a season and a half to realize, no, they're not able to do that. And I think the biggest thing was the offensive play on the field this season, but also it's been reported, I think by a Rap Sheet, that Mark Davis went and spoke to multiple coaches on Tuesday before firing Ziegler and McDaniels, and at some point also went to multiple players, likely team captains, and really asked them about the culture of the team and everything like that, and essentially came away very upset with what he heard from those players. And then as far as Tuesday, part of that process with talking to other coaches was, seeking out his interim head coach. And of course, he found that Antonio Pierce was the best candidate. And, obviously we did our podcast Tuesday morning, the day of, funny enough. And, we gave our Raiders versus Giants preview, which we'll kind of redo today a little bit, just barely. But at some point, I said if they were to fire Josh McDaniels during the season, I would like to see Patrick Graham, the defensive coordinator, become the interim head coach. This makes so much more sense to me. Antonio Pierce, for one thing, I don't know how much experience Patrick Graham has being a head coach. And obviously, Antonio Pierce has zero experience in the NFL, but he's been a high school head coach. He may have been a head coach in college, but I can't confirm that. But he has a couple years under his belt coaching. But I mean, you want to talk about somebody who's going to fire up this team and boost the morale of these players, of this locker room. I think Pierce is your guy. And you can leave the play calling to the play callers, which, speaking of, obviously Halloween night, Tuesday, McDaniels and Ziegler, it's announced that they're fired. In their place, again, Antonio Pierce, the head coach. Champ Kelly, the assistant GM, is now interim GM. No brainer. In fact, he was actually in the running to be our general manager back when Ziegler and McDaniels were actually hired. So I think both these guys have a genuine shot to actually keep these roles if they succeed this season. But Wednesday morning, it was also announced that Mick Lombardi, the offensive coordinator, was also fired, and Bo Hardigree, the quarterback coach, is taking over play calling on offense. That's my biggest question mark in this whole process, because there's obviously another thing that we'll get to in a second at the quarterback position. But I don't really know much about Hardigree. He spent time with the Patriots, the Jets, a few other teams, mostly as a quarterback coach or an offensive assistant. So I don't really know how this is going to go. I don't know what his offensive shtick is, right? But if I'm being honest, I watched that press conference with Antonio Pierce and Champ Kelly, and for one thing, Antonio Pierce fired me the fuck up, dude. But he mentioned at one point the term player run organization. And he said all the teams that he's played on were teams that succeeded were essentially player run. And I don't know if that's exactly true, because I know he was coached under Tom Coughlin on the Giants. I don't think he's exactly a player run type of coach, but I can see that for this offense specifically. I can see Hardigree just going to Devontae Adams, going to Josh Jacobs, working with the offensive line coach, and figuring out, like, hey, what's best for this? What do you want, Devontae? What do you want us to integrate into the offense? Josh Jacobs, how do you want us to integrate the run game into this offense? How do you want to go about this? Get more Hunter Renfrow, get more Jacoby Myers, get more Michael Mayer, right? Spread the ball and get it going. And they chose the right guy at quarterback, because I think it was Thursday night, it was reported, and then Wednesday announced that Aidan O'Connell is now the starting quarterback moving forward. And I don't know if it was, yeah. And I was passionate about that on Tuesday morning when we had our podcast.
We got to do it Pat McAfee style. The guy that tore it up in the preseason, Aidan O'Connell.
So Jimmy Garoppolo's been benched. I think I'm getting my wish. I don't think we're going to see him again. I think he's going to be the third string quarterback. Not announced.
Ryan Hoyer?
I think so because he has an injury clause in his contract. They're going to probably treat this similar to Derek Carr at the end of last season, where they don't want him to get hurt and go into that injury clause and then have to pay him. They want to end the season with O'Connell. If God forbid Aidan O'Connell gets hurt, it'll be Brian Hoyer, and maybe they bring in a young quarterback on the streets. I don't know, because that's what I would do. Because I mean, I've been saying, like, I'm sorry, I don't care. I want to lose. Now I'll admit, Antonio Pierce has changed that for me. Like I think they can win some games. You want it to work out with him. Yeah, I think this feels a lot like Rich Bisaccia. Now, I think Bisaccia has a plethora of coaching experience, and he was also a locker room guy, but he was very experienced and, for lack of a better term, aged, and I think wise, and players saw that and really took to that, right? If you ever have a chance to hear from a player speaking about Bisaccia, it's nothing but good things. But also, he's a hard ass, and he'll chew your ass out. And Antonio Pierce, he seems like a very passionate and very forward person. He said some good things in this press conference, and everything he said was clearly from the heart. There was nothing scripted. Like, initially, I was like, oh, this is a good little, PR stunt. Like, okay, we're going to, like, I remember when Mayock came out after John Gruden was let out, because of the scandal with him. And then they had Bisaccia come up in the press conference. Like, I came away pretty impressed, but also, like, he came out with, like, his grandpa glasses, and he had, like, a piece of paper with, like, notes and stuff. And he clearly, wasn't used to this process. Antonio Pierce, dude, I'm not trying to compare the two, but just Antonio Pierce, just everything from the heart.
Yeah,
very impressive.
Like, I grew up on the streets of Compton. I grew up a Raider fan,
And I love that. I love that he's not taking this lightly, obviously. He's very humble by this. But he's also, like, he's a Raider, and I think that's one of my biggest things with this whole process since Tuesday is this is very clearly, I mean, this is another thing I said on the pod last time was this team has no identity. They're trying to be this Patriots 2.0 Patriots West with McDaniels and Ziegler. They think that they should be good, but they're really just trash because their coach sucks that bad. They had lost their identity. And you said they lost on offense. I meant as an organization, they lost their identity. And a guy like Antonio Pierce is exactly what I mean as far as what is the Raider identity. If you watch that press conference, I implore anybody that watches this video, watch the press conference with Antonio Pierce and Champ Kelly. That is the Raider identity. We will have it back, thankfully. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also I'd love it if you could play it, but I don't know if there's like a
copyright thing.
Well, the Marshawn Lynch video. That was PR. That was the Raiders like, hey, let's get these fans kind of like on board with this. But tell you what, it worked for me. I love that shit. I eat that stuff up, dude. I was getting the chills. Everything Antonio Pierce said and everything in that Marshawn Lynch video just makes me want to run through a wall. Max Crosby's quote tweeting it. The big message in that Marshawn Lynch video was like, this is the Raider way. We're going to play the rest of the season and moving forward the Raider way. And Max Crosby quote tweets it with the Raider way. And I'm like, all right, we're on board. Like, let's do it. And again, like, leave the play calling to the play callers and have your head coach just make decisions. And that's what it looks like right now. I think Antonio Pierce is going to fire this team up again. And I guess my whole point with Patrick Graham is, again, they have a real shot to prove like they're worth keeping past this season, Pierce and Champ Kelly. And if so, you keep Patrick Graham as the defensive coordinator. And in my opinion, what is likely is they seek out a new offensive coordinator. That works for me. Now, obviously, I haven't even seen Antonio Pierce coach yet. He might not be ready for the NFL, and that's okay. But it's an interesting time for sure.
I've got an easy way to go about it if you're Mark Davis.
Yeah.
You keep Antonio Pierce. All right, this is how you should evaluate it is, let him play out the rest of the season. Obviously, I don't think they're going to make a move off their interim guy. You know what I mean? This is just like, it's for the rest of the season. This is it.
Yeah.
And if the Raiders finish out, not overall, but if they finish out the remainder of their games with a winning record, I say you give them another year.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think Mark Davis learns from his mistakes, and every coaching process that he's gone through, he's done something sort of reactionary to what he's done with the previous regime. So with Reggie McKenzie and Jack Del Rio, it was like, oh, I have my guy in mind, and no matter what, if I get a chance at him, I'm going to take him, and that's John Gruden. And we saw the Raiders play lesser than expected in 2017 after a big playoff year in 2016. So he fires Jack Del Rio and he goes with Gruden. Well, what does John Gruden do? Well, I want to build my own team. I want to rebuild. He kept Carr, but he trades Mack, he trades Cooper, and they turn to shit. They go to 3 wins, 4 wins, and then finally like 6 or 8 wins. And then right when it looks like they might start getting good, scandal, he's out of here. All right, now what? Bazakia takes a Raider John Gruden team from like at best 500 to making the playoffs. And a lot of Raider fans felt that they should have kept Bazakia, and I think I was one of them. But I was open to the idea of a great coach being out there and being worth taking over him because, again, with these guys, like they don't have much head coaching experience in the NFL. So I want a guy who's ready for that and can really change this organization. Whereas I felt like Bazakia was maybe a guy who was just going to kind of not be complacent, but, clearly he would have kept Carr and he would have really, had the players be a big part of that, I think. But in hindsight, it's like, well, maybe they should have just kept Bazakia. Look at like John Harbaugh, and I'm not trying to compare here other than the fact that they're both head coaches that were special teams oriented coaches. You have them be in charge of the roster and leading the team, and you let your coordinators coordinate, right? So again, Patrick Graham, and then whoever the offensive coordinator is, let them do their thing, right? I like that. So now with Josh McDaniels, who was big name, lots of success, failure as Raiders coach, I think the outlook from Mark Davis is with an open mind. It is anything goes. He's gonna see how Antonio Pierce and Champ Kelly do, and if it's not successful, then all right, let's see what we can go and do in the offseason. But again, it's an open-minded Mark Davis this season, and that's what they need. They need him to just go out there and not be too reactionary, So, and also bear in mind, Josh McDaniels was signed to a 6-year contract, and this is year 2. So I don't know. Apparently, head coach contracts are fully guaranteed. So, Mark Davis is going to be spending some money on him and potentially John Gruden as well still. So I don't know if that affects his decision. I hope it doesn't. But, I had said on a previous podcast, I would look for a coach that's more with a chip on their shoulder, not top dollar, and massive ego, who thinks that it's his way or the highway and the players don't know shit about coaching or play calling or what they should do. I think they should go for a coach that's more chip on his shoulder. He's going to boost the morale, really help the locker room, have a good sense of team, right? And hopefully, if it's an offensive guy, if it's not Antonio Pierce, right? Like, get a guy who obviously has experience, but also has a good track record on offense.
Well, I'm glad that you brought up a good track record. And let me tell you, you know my favorite coaching candidate. I've been saying that the Raiders should get this guy for about almost a decade now. And obviously there were like the Del Rio years where I felt like the Raiders should never have fired Del Rio. I don't think that he deserved it, but Mark Davis was just like, yeah, I want to give it back to Gruden, and that bit him in the butt.
Yeah.
But I think the Raiders, if Antonio Pierce is his name,
Yeah.
if he doesn't work out, and there's he just sort of leads the team, and the team's sort of on this, like, they have no direction, like they're not playing, it's not necessarily the Raider way, or it seems a little chaotic. My favorite candidate for the Raiders is Jim Harbaugh. And I'm going to say Harbaugh has a proven track record of going places, going to programs and turning it around. And I think the Raiders have excellent talent. The 49ers back in the day, an NFL team, the team that we talk about every week, they had talent, but they had no direction. They had Mike Singletary, and they had that experiment, and in a way you could actually compare Mike Singletary to Antonio Pierce.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So says a lot of the right things, and he's like, I want winners, I want to do it, the Raider way, right? So to speak. But if you get a guy who, like, all right, what is one thing that you've wanted, Mike? You want the Raiders to go in the right direction. You want to see playoff games. That is what I think what all Raider fans want.
Yeah, I think right now a consistent playoff contender with a good quarterback and hopefully a great coach is what I want.
Mm-hmm. I think, at Stanford, Harbaugh developed Andrew Luck. Andrew Luck went on to be a great NFL quarterback, for a couple years until he retired early due to all the injuries. And so, I mean, if you look at Stanford now versus like Stanford when Jim Harbaugh was the coach, Stanford was much better then. He went to the Niners. They were terrible with good pieces, like the Raiders are right now. He turned them around. They went to 3 straight NFC championship games and had 2, all right, one quarterback who was on the brink of, like, everyone thought Alex Smith was a bust.
Yeah.
Jim Harbaugh came in there and absolutely, he gave Alex Smith confidence that he was good. You would see Jim Harbaugh, like, spending time with his quarterbacks, hyping them up, letting them know that they're the best. They belong. Yep. And, there's nobody that he would rather have. And then later on, he would rather have Kaepernick. But that's another story. And then Kaepernick turned into, a superstar, like, in his rookie season.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? I thought Kaepernick was one of the best quarterbacks in the league, when he first emerged.
He was on fire, and he brought something different to the team that they needed. So, yeah.
Yeah. And so Harbaugh leaves, and then Kaepernick was never the same. And honestly, the Niners were never the same until they would hire Kyle Shanahan years later. And, we have Kyle Shanahan now, and there's still many times where I miss Jim Harbaugh. I miss his leadership. And, he was a coach that I think players could get behind. I heard that he did lose the Niners locker room towards the end, but there was a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes between Harbaugh, Balke, Jed York. And Harbaugh's one of those guys where he'll rub people the wrong way because like you said, you don't want a guy where it's like my way or the highway. I think Jim Harbaugh is kind of like one of those guys who always has a chip on his shoulder and like is like an old school football mind.
Mm.
And so, going back to his track record, he goes to Michigan, and I mean, what was Michigan before Harbaugh? I don't watch college football like that, but Michigan now is a top 10 school,
Top 4.
top 4 this
Yeah.
this season still.
Yeah, they're in the running to hopefully go and possibly get into that national championship. I think that's his current goal, obviously. And not to cut you off or anything, I just my opinion with him has been, yes, I agree on the track record. I agree he's a great candidate, and yeah, I got to give a shout out to my dad. He's been on McDaniels' ass since day one, if not day 2. He didn't really like the idea of the hire. He wanted either Sean Payton or Doug Peterson. And I don't know about Payton yet, but look at Doug Peterson. Also, would have costed a lot for Payton, but regardless,
it would have costed like a first.
But I
Doug
think
Peterson would have been a great hire for the Raiders.
He would have been great.
He recently won a Super Bowl, and then the Eagles fired Peterson because I think he like fumbled it with the quarterbacks, but he turned out to be right because Jalen Hurts turned out to be good.
Yeah, and I think he was
Doug
the one
Peterson,
that drafted him.
Yeah, Doug Peterson correctly evaluated that Carson Wentz wasn't it, and that they needed to get Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, and it's also possible that Peterson was a big reason why Wentz was having an MVP season when he was healthy. And then once he came back from injury, he may have been changed, and they had drafted Hurts and saw something in him and, so forth. But, yeah, I think Peterson would have been great. I think he and Mike McDaniel were my 2 favorite options in the hiring process for Josh McDaniels. But, yeah, point being, I got to give my dad credit because he's been on McDaniel's ass and does not like him at all and been calling for his firing since maybe mid-season 1 last year. And I was more of like, well, I think we got to give him a little bit of time because it takes time to build your team, to build your vision of a team. But I sent you, I'm going to send you a picture right now. If you can pull it up, it's going to be on Twitter. It's just become abundantly clear that, actually not that one. Coaches from the Bill Belichick tree, or as the Pat McAfee show put it, the Belichick bush, they do not succeed. We can kind of go through the list once you pull it up here. Again, this is from the Pat McAfee show. This was today, literally right before we started this. I was watching the Pat McAfee show, and they were saying some good things about Antonio Pierce in that press conference. But Bill O'Brien, 52-54. Brian Flores, 24-25. He's been hot at times, but he also had issues with the Dolphins. Nick Saban, 15-17. Joe Judge, 10-23. He was horrible. Josh McDaniels between the Broncos and the Raiders, horrible. Romeo Crennel. At one point, he was a good interim coach for either the Texans or Chiefs or somebody. But obviously not very successful otherwise. Matt Patricia, we already know that, and then Eric Mangini. So,
God, what an upgrade the Lions got from Matt Patricia to Dan Campbell.
Yeah, and that's another guy, Dan Campbell. Dan Campbell and Mike Vrabel are the 2 of the types of coaches I want, which are locker room leaders.
Now
they're gonna.
Let me pause you on that real quick.
I know
Mike Vrabel, bring up Mike.
He's the one guy not on this
coaching
list.
bush,
but he's also won a lot of games, and he's been very successful. He's led the Titans to a 1 seed. And I think
I kind of feel like the clock is on him, though.
Oh, for sure, yeah. But I think Will Levis might help him. He looked pretty good. And Tannehill's got to be benched, I think, for them. But anyways, the one thing about that list that we just had, I don't think any of those guys, maybe Brian Flores might be the only one who's a former player. Those other guys are analytical, fucking pencil pushers, clipboard guys, exactly, So, yeah, I definitely don't want to see anybody from that tree, to put
Mhm.
it simply. A couple other ones that I sent you, if you can pull them up. The Bussin' with the Boys one is just funny.
Which one?
It should be towards the top.
Oh, hold on. I got it here.
We'll just kind of go tweet by tweet here.
And then we'll move on to the preview.
Yeah.
Raiders went nuclear last night. This is Bussin' with the Boys on Twitter. They fired head coach Josh McDaniels, GM Dave Ziegler, benched Jimmy Garoppolo the day before his birthday. By the way, happy birthday, Jimmy Garoppolo. You're still
Yeah,
a Raider, so we could.
Yeah.
You know.
Happy birthday. Enjoy this brand new bench.
Okay. Promoted Antonio Pierce, GM Champ Kelly, quarterback Aidan O'Connell.
And then the next tweet I sent you is Max Crosby reacting on his podcast. Just a clip, little 1 minute clip, reacting to the coaching stuff.
Let me pull it up.
It's from Dov Kleiman.
All right, y'all. A lot of big breaking news in the last 24 hours. Clearly, everyone saw last night we're making a change in our head coach. I want to start with, first off, just giving my thanks to Coach McDaniels and Dave Ziegler. You know, the second I got that Coach McDaniels was going to be our next head coach, he reached out to me right away, ends up giving me a life-changing contract. Got a ton of respect for those guys and wish them the best moving forward. But obviously, we're on to new things. We got our boy, Antonio Pierce, stepping in as the interim head coach. He's as real as they come. I know Raider Nation is fired up about it. Real Raider from day one. He's from Compton. He's been Raider fan since he was born. Obviously, being a former player, won multiple Super Bowls playing in New York on those great teams. He was a captain. He just has that element of understanding the player's perspective, but also being a coach. His introductory press conference, he wants to match my energy. I already sent him a nice little text saying no fucking chance. The team meeting was lit. We're definitely fired up, going into this week.
Yeah, man. It's a different energy, I think. That's what they needed.
Translation, he's like, Josh and Dave, thanks for the money, losers.
I mean, again, it's a team-friendly deal. He could have got more, honestly.
He could have gotten more, absolutely.
And at some point, he probably should ask for more. So, can you pull up the Tristan Kuhn, and then the last one would be the Ari Mirov tweet?
Yeah, I got you. So let's see here. Tristan Kuhn.
This Tristan Kuhn tweet is really just kind of looking forward to the offseason and what the offseason might look like for this team.
Oh my, this is a beefy tweet.
Yeah, I love this guy. He's very, very good.
Okay.
I'll read it. The Raiders will have a new head coach and GM going into the offseason. They retain all of their draft picks, likely a top 10 pick as well, plus 2 additional 7th-round picks. They have a projected $67.9 million in cap space, which is solid.
Question, timeout. Question. Is it true that the Raiders were close to trading Renfro, but then Mark Davis said that's not happening? Like, is that true?
I didn't hear the part about Mark Davis, but I think Dov Kleiman tweeted that the Saints were close to possibly trading for Renfro. But I don't know how true that is. It could just be kind of a rumor, But that was the assumption all along was like, well, if they're going to use him like this, they'll probably trade him. But the other thing that was brought out was somebody, and I don't remember who tweeted it, said, the Raiders were completely silent, like radio silent on Tuesday during the trade deadline. And once it was announced that the coach and GM was fired, somebody from another team said to this person, well, that makes sense, and explains why they ghosted us. So I think, firing your lead guys on the trade deadline day is kind of weird, but it also might be because Mark Davis was like, let's just stop it right here. I don't want them to make any moves for them and their regime when I want to move on from this regime. So keeping Renfro is good. It helps the ability to win games. Yeah. So they'll save $13 million in cap space by releasing Garoppolo as a post-June 1st release. Additionally, they can save $8.2 million with cutting Renfro, $3.2 with Faison, 3.5 with Spillane, but they'll likely keep him, especially if Antonio Pierce is the coach. 2.3 million with Tillery, 900K with Hoyer. That'll happen. They can restructure Colton Miller, Devontae Adams. He'll have big cap hits in 25 and 26. They could restructure Renfro if a trade's unlikely. It would lock Renfro into the team longer term, which he may appreciate. You can restructure Crosby, but that'd be pushing for later, as well as Jacoby Myers. And then he says they have a good blend of young talent with veteran superstars. There are some capable starters, but they'll need to add. It's a big offseason for the team, but they will have the opportunity to land their franchise quarterback along with up to $86 million in spendable cap space. So, yeah, and I mean, probably depending on who our head coach is next offseason. Right now, I'm taking it back on trading Devontae Adams. I think you keep him as long as you can, as long as he's happy, as long as he wants to be here, and helps in building a winner in this franchise, because he's one of those guys that is a Raider. He knows the Raider way. He knows how to win.
I think the problem is just wanting him to be on board, because when he came here, he thought Derek Carr was going to be here and be his quarterback. You guys have to fill that gap, or Aidan O'Connell has to step up and show that they can feature Devontae Adams in the offense.
Yeah, I think Aidan O'Connell clearly has a very great shot to prove himself here. But I also think in the offseason you can rely on your captains to help not make decisions, but help in leaning towards decisions. Maybe you have Devontae Adams help in choosing an offensive coordinator and potentially a quarterback, but we'll see. And then can you actually pull up this last tweet from Ari Merov, and then we'll move on?
Yeah, I got you.
This is a good little tidbit on how the current locker room is looking under Antonio Pierce.
I'm calling right now. This is why they're losing, because they're worried about the wrong shit. The locker room, they're playing basketball. Fucking run the right route. Catch the ball. Come on. Oh, catch that shit. Come on.
I mean, you can hear him right there. He's saying, they're going to see this video and say, well, here's the problem with the team, blah, blah, blah. But I think this is a team, again, with a better sense of morale. And I think they're going to go out there and they're going to play the Raider way. And we'll see how it goes.
Let's talk about it then. Let's preview. Okay, so we've already done a preview of the Raiders versus Giants. You guys can go back. I don't think I'm going to upload it.
Yeah.
I won't even upload this because you guys can just find it here. We don't have too many topics today. Yeah. But we are going to, I guess, do sort of a redo.
Redo, yeah.
Yeah.
And it'll be quick. It shouldn't take more than 5 minutes here, honestly. I want to start with a little breaking news for the Raiders roster. They signed linebacker Jalen Smith off of the Saints practice squad. Literally all of the first roster moves, other than Aidan O'Connell, under Antonio Pierce has been linebacker related. They signed 2 linebackers to the practice squad and now signed Jalen Smith to the active roster. And he had previously visited with the Raiders in the offseason or early season, but ended up on the Saints. And they released cornerback David Long Jr. in his place, a guy who has, I think, started a couple games this year. So we're already feeling a little effect from Antonio Pierce and company. But yeah, as far as the Giants game, again, you can find our previous preview for this on our last live stream if you really want, episode 19. But just really quick. Daniel Jones, he's going to play. Darren Waller, he's officially out. And then Leonard Williams, probably one of their best defenders, just got traded to the Seahawks. So it's still I have a hard time still picking who's going to win this game because I mean, I think this Raiders locker room is going to be fired up and going to want to go out there and prove something, especially for the new coach, right? But again, Bo Hardegree gives me a little bit of the heebie-jeebies. I don't know how his offense is going to look, but you also have to add in that this is an excruciatingly short week of prep for this team. You know, they probably started prepping on Monday and even Tuesday under McDaniels, and that gets thrown out the window. So you can argue this is a short week starting Wednesday, yesterday, of practice for what this week's game plan is going to be. Now, maybe they go with a little bit or a lot of what McDaniels was game planning on Monday and Tuesday, but they might add in some little changes here and there as the week goes on. Okay, we could do more of this, we could do more of that. That makes sense. Maybe next week's game against the Jets will be more of a sign of what this offense is going to look like, whereas this week it's going to be very maybe vanilla, very easy. Not easy, but, maybe easy on Aidan O'Connell, giving him some simple stuff. Hey, just throw it to Devontae, But again, I want to see Michael Mayer integrated. I want to see develop the run. And this is a game to do with Josh Jacobs. And honestly, I think that's what I expect. I expect a lot of Josh Jacobs in this game, and hopefully Devontae Adams, Jacoby Myers, and Hunter Renfrow. So, I mean, Aidan O'Connell, man, he's got weapons to throw to. So other than him being a rookie, he's going to have his mishaps. But at the same time, I mean, I'm not going to give him a big excuse other than I don't know who this offensive coordinator is. I don't know how good he is. But I think they have a lot of help around them, in Devontae Adams, Jacobs, and so forth. And I think I like the offensive line coach. He's been doing a pretty good job. Like here and there, the Lions game at the end, they blew it. But for the most part, the offensive line has actually played somewhat well. So, do you still choose the Raiders? And do you have anything else for this game?
I do have something else for this game. Let me tell you, and this is going to help you make your prediction. But I envision a close-fought game with high energy from the fans. The fans are going to be pumped up. I don't think Raider fans liked Josh McDaniels. I think the ones that still had faith in him lost faith very quickly this season. And I just have to say, I think that there's going to be a new energy in that locker room. And this game might be tight. You know what I mean? The Raiders overnight aren't going to be some sort of powerhouse. But on Sunday, I really think that they might actually I think they'll probably win. Because I don't think the Giants are that good. And what better way to stick it to Josh McDaniels than to go out there and win with a guy who's never been an NFL head coach before?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Adding more, I guess, dirt on his name of like the bad stuff that's happened. More to the Jeff Saturday, the Division II undrafted quarterback, right? So I think I'm going to keep my pick of the Raiders this week. I picked the Raiders because, I can't even tell you why. I just didn't think the Giants were that good of a team. And
you said you don't really like Daniel Jones, and honestly, on paper, especially, this Raiders team should be better than the Giants.
Mm-hmm.
Like they have Saquon. Again, Waller's out. Williams is gone now. Try naming another big name player on the Giants roster, right?
Mm-hmm. The Raiders have talent. They just had poor direction, and I'm looking for them to establish the run. And I'm telling you, my gut is telling me it's going to be a close game up until the end, and the Raiders are going to have to make like some sort of crazy game-winning drive, and the fans are going to go nuts. Like, that sounds so specific, but if this actually happens, I mean, we're clipping this, and I'm like reposting, with today's date of November 2nd, 2023 at 1:48 p.m., right? I'm telling you, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. Watch the Raiders get like blown out. Like, oh my God, that would, if the Raiders got blown out on Sunday, wouldn't that kill like all the, Antonio Pierce hype that you had? And you're like, yeah, it's pretty stupid anyways. We
No,
should probably get a top quarterback. Like,
I mean, if they lose this game, I'm going to be singing, just lose. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
that's what I said in the last podcast was I'd rather see Aidan O'Connell develop him, but also probably lose a lot of games and earn a top pick. But granted,
that's another thing.
Mhm.
The reason why I'm sticking with the Raiders is because they're benching Jimmy Garoppolo, and I actually have more faith that Aidan O'Connell is going to be able to hit Devontae Adams and Jacoby Myers than Jimmy Garoppolo.
100%.
Boom!
Yep.
Lock it in. Touchdown,
and-
Josh. I win again.
I sent you a tweet, another tweet. I sent you 2 more tweets. Can you open the bottom one from Arjun Menon? And then we'll end the video with the Max Crosby tweet that I sent you after I give my prediction. But this first one from Arjun, so the most recent tweet I sent you, is what I was talking about with the offensive line. Offensive pressure rate allowed when an offense is in pure passing situations. Titans and Jets have allowed the most pressure most often in situations where they're expected to pass. Little surprised to see the Chiefs up there as well. Well, guess who's at the bottom? The Raiders.
The Raiders.
So they've actually done a pretty damn good job of blocking on passing downs, on obvious passing downs, not allowing pressure. If that continues, the Charger game was the game that Aidan O'Connell played, and that was probably their worst game as far as pass blocking. So if they can play better for him, he can go out there and he'll succeed. I think. I really believe it. So don't pull up the Crosby one just yet. I said that the Raiders have a short week of game planning and, changing up their game plans again for this Giants game. Granted, the Giants also have to reconsider their game plan now because they're not going to be facing Josh McDaniels. They're not going to be facing Jimmy Garoppolo. They're facing Aidan O'Connell. They got to look at the Chargers, film and see what they can get from that. They might blitz a lot. They might, really try to pressure the quarterback. But hopefully this last photo that we showed might help in not allowing that pressure. And hopefully our picks will be true because I'm also picking the Raiders to win.
Oh, okay. So I got to share this. Everybody look at this. Look at this. Is everybody seeing this? Boom! Raiders.
Yep. When Josh McDaniels and Jimmy Garoppolo were the head coach and quarterback of this team, I expected to lose again. But now, with a new sense of hope and morale for this team, I think they should beat a pretty shitty Giants team. And with that said, go ahead.
Everybody at home, I just want you guys to understand that Mike is not a real fan, okay? I stuck with my pick of the Raiders through the Josh McDaniels. And I'm not even a Raider fan. I don't even like the Raiders.
This is 1:42, 10 minutes ago, Sean Reed just tweeted, the Raiders' offensive line has been having impromptu wrestling matches in the locker room today. So obviously this is starting to look like a very fun locker room. I'm not going to say whether or not playing around in the locker room is exactly the best thing, but it certainly builds a team culture,
Yeah.
And I think, and that was something that Antonio Pierce said. He said, I want these guys to focus on caring for the person next to them, their brothers on this team, their coaches and everything, and fighting for each other. And I mean, building morale and a sense of a great brotherhood in the locker room, that helps. So having impromptu wrestling matches and Devontae Adams, going one-on-one on, I think that was the running back, number 22. I'm forgetting his name. That looks like no.
Abdullah.
Yeah, Abdullah. That's who it looked like. So
it's just really funny because I bet you they're over here thinking after McDaniels got fired, the first thing that they were thinking was like, hey, we can finally do the things that Josh wouldn't let us do. They're over here having fun in the locker room. Give it like 2 weeks. And it's like, they're all just like, cavemen in their underwear. Like, just nobody's done any laundry. They haven't showered, like no responsibilities. It's just like absolute chaos. Like, yeah, Josh never let me not shower after the games. Freedom!
Well, I mean, 2 things here. One, it was pretty obvious that McDaniels and just the Patriot way was a very no fun, all business sort of vibe. But also, just another quick shout out to Antonio Pierce. I mean, his first ever game as a head coach in the NFL is against his former team that he played for. And like he said at the press conference, you can't even write that up. Like it's going to be cool. And just imagine, dude, if they win this game, I hope to God they film the post game, in
the locker
room. Oh my God, dude, it will be legendary.
Going back to what I was saying, 3 weeks from now, there's going to be flies in that locker room, and there's going to be like moldy pizza boxes and like beer cans, dude.
Yeah, beer cans. Well,
McDaniels never let us drink.
Honestly,
Antonio Pierce, he's letting us do what we want to do.
Yeah,
and then they just went out. They just went out.
Yeah, they won't win out. They got like the Dolphins and Chiefs and stuff, but I think
I said they went out.
That would be awesome. That'd be insane. Again, another, wild card Rich Bezakia type season. That'd be so cool. But honestly, seeing that video of Devontae and hearing about impromptu wrestling matches, this kind of reminds me of like the 70s and 80s Raiders who just like didn't give a shit. They just went out there and beat your ass. And obviously back then there were ways that you could cheat and stuff, so it's a little different. But I think the vibe with those teams was it was a brotherhood. They had fun, and they beat your ass while they had fun, And there's going to be rough patches here, but hopefully they can get there. Mm-hmm. So
did they take showers on those Raider teams?
I'm sure they had to because they were probably very smelly men.
Yeah, I can't imagine the smell of those wrestling matches of those offensive linemen.
Yeah, or like John Vila and John Matuzak. Just those crazy-ass defensive linemen that they had. They had fucking Fred Biletnikoff and Lester Hayes just covered in stickum.
Jeez.
But
yeah, so we're picking the Raiders, and
one last thing. You could probably put up that please comment and subscribe. I want to play the video, the Marshawn Lynch video. If you could somehow put it in the most full screen possible, just for any Raider fan that watches this to get a little hyped up if they hadn't seen it. What we can do is, I doubt that they're going to copyright it, but if they did, we can just cut it out at the end of the video. But we can just end it with this video.
And also, I think it's on social media, so isn't that like fair use?
Yeah, I would say right here, like, we don't own this video. This is from the Raiders' social media. We do not claim it at all.
We're not looking to profit off of this.
Yeah, there's nothing really to profit from. This
we're
is
just talking about it.
Yeah, genuinely great.
Before I pull that up, can I tell you something that I've been staring at you this whole time, and I decided, you know what, I'm just gonna say it at the end because I didn't want to like cut you off at any particular point. Hold on, come closer. Actually, no. Like
a halo ring? Is that what you're gonna say?
No. It almost looks like you have a powdered wig on, like George Washington. You know what I mean? Under the hat.
7 years ago, the Raiders.
We hereby declare the Raiders winners once again.
I thought you were going to say, this is the first episode I might have seen Mike smiling the entire way through.
Oh, God. Yeah. That. Well, maybe energy. You might have been smiling when the Raiders kicked the Niners' ass in the joint practices.
Probably that, and then the Broncos game. The Broncos game I was very happy about week 1, but it's been since week 1 that I've been happy. So.
All right. So we got this 1 minute and 18 second video that we're going to put. Again, we don't own the rights. The Raiders do. So But this is, Mike, this is the Raider way, apparently.
Hey, look, man, being a Raider, straight up, it means something. I don't do that. Wear that. You got to be that. And when you be that, you feel that.
Robertson in the back corner.
And when you feel that, they feel that. That fearlessness, that pressure.
Hey, we are right here. We're right here.
And you know what they say about pressure. Pressure busts pipes. That also make diamonds.
Down inside the 5. Max Crosby.
You might get knocked down. You might get pushed around. You don't tuck our tail and run. We turn around and look, fight. Because that's the Raider way.
Keep talking, communicate.
No matter the record, no matter the score, at the end of the day, you want to make an individual feel good. And everybody got the opportunity. So when they one-on-one battles, you start there, I guarantee you, you'll be on top in the winning column in a check game. From here on out, you must go out and play the Raider way.
Yeah, man.
All right, we lied. We wanted to profit off of that. No, just playing. No, it's a cool video. You know, still got to do it on the field though. Like
They definitely do, but I think it's clear that there's a message going towards the fans and the players that it's time to play the Raider way and not Patriot West, not the Josh McDaniels way. It's time to just go out there, win your one-on-ones, win your battles, and just win, baby.
I have to say two things. If I was a fan of the Raiders, that video would probably get me, pumped up. So the second thing is, man, they made that quick. They fired Josh McDaniels, and like they just decided, hey, Marshawn, we need you in the studio real quick. And the video editor did a great job.
Yeah, it was impressive. They posted that thing like Wednesday morning. I don't know how they did it. So
another thing I have to say, Mark Davis, how dare you? My prediction was almost spot on with the Lions game. When I said, I think in the preview, I said, hey, maybe the Raiders will get blown out and Josh McDaniels gets fired, right after the game. One day after the game.
The day of our podcast,
Yeah. It was like, if he would have done it a couple hours earlier, I could have been like, see, Raider fans, I know everything. Josh is always right.
Yeah. I think actually the last thing I'll say here, I saw a lot of people on Twitter, giving kudos to Mark Davis because he finally did what he had to do. And I don't blame them for feeling that way. And I agree, but also, come on, it was clear what had to happen. So, I'm glad that it did happen. And I think I've said it before on different podcasts, but I don't have like a level of disbelief in Mark Davis because I really think he does rely on people around him. And once he has that head coach and GM, he lets them do their work and do their thing. He doesn't try to get in the way, but behind closed doors, he was talking to coaches, he was talking to players, and, hearing about the process led by McDaniels and Ziegler, and finally made a decision on it. So, it's nice to see the fans kind of getting a little bit behind Mark Davis because either way, he's going to own the Raiders, So.
Well, at the end of the day, he's the one who made the mistake in firing McDaniels. So, I mean, you can get behind him. I mean,
Miss Gruden or Del Rio or
of hiring. He made the mistake of hiring.
Oh, yeah.
Did I say firing? Sorry.
Firing, yeah.
Yeah, no. He made the mistake of hiring McDaniels. So it was his job, as an owner, to correct that mistake. So I won't give him credit yet until they're successful again and he hires the right guy.
Yeah,
but
I'll say this last thing.
He did make the right decision.
Yeah, this week for sure. I'll give him a little pass for hiring McDaniels because from what I heard, he was interviewing GMs first. He wanted to get a GM that would work well with the head coach. And eventually he got to Dave Ziegler, and every GM he would ask, who would be your top candidate to be your head coach with the Raiders? Finally gets to Ziegler and he says, oh, Josh McDaniels, easily. And Mark Davis, apparently his response was, but he's available, like I can get him. And Ziegler's like, I think he would sign on if I'm the GM. And I think that just, full send, like, oh, 6 Super Bowl champions. Oh, dude, like that's a no-brainer. And I get the thought process, but we all know how that went. So last thing I'll say here is just I hope Mark Davis finds the right process, and starting with an open mind is a good way to start. Because it felt like he didn't have quite the open mind with Rich Bisaccia back 2 years ago. So have an open mind, have the right people around you to help you in making the decisions, and hopefully succeed.
Yeah. This will be my last thing. You said something about, having faith in Mark Davis, like about people having a lack of faith for Mark Davis. I think you said something along those lines a couple minutes ago. Whoever you are watching this video, whether you have faith in Mark Davis or not, I think we can all agree that we have less faith in his barber.